So as a reminder, when you are in Replit, to run the test cases, you have to go on the left-hand menu here, click on the check mark to find this unit test interface, and you need to press the Run Test button. This is where you'll see the green check marks and whatnot. If you failed the test, it's important to see the first couple things, what the expected output is versus your given output, and then it tells you a bunch of other random Java stuff. Just know that there's something wrong with your code. On your end, you may be able to view what the test cases were, so you can kind of debug, but no guarantees, because my version of Teams may look different compared to yours. Okay, and so these FRQs, I'm in charge of writing test cases for sound and gizmo. I started writing one for sound, I think. I haven't tested it completely just yet to see if it's actually working, but feel free to check there. Mr. Simon did a couple for word list, that's ready to go. Digits he may be working on, and gizmo at the moment remains untouched. So keep running those tests each day to see that you're still passing everything once you have completed it. All right. So we have more slides, and then the focus of today's class is being sure that you properly enrolled into the Replit teams, making sure that you have your first and last name listed in your profile so that Mr. Simon and I can grade and award the right person with your points. The other day we talked about word list. We went over a solution with that. We went over some various statistics around recent AP exams. And for today, let me see if I can grade in real time this next FRQ from 2011. So that's actually, maybe I didn't do enough prep work for that. So would anyone like to volunteer their code to be graded according to the rubric, and we'll learn from what happens? I don't think I am smart enough to hide your names and all that. Or maybe I'll just choose someone from block 1, and then you guys won't really care. Volunteers?
I mean, you can choose mine, but I don't know if I submitted it or not.
Okay. Are you allowed to resubmit? Teams is new to me. Is that possible?
I can check.
Yeah, see if you can do that, and we can learn from a not.
Which question do you want to look at?
The sound. Igor says you can resubmit. In either case, if I find an obscure username whose identity is protected, then we're fine. Let's see. All of these are your actual names and stuff. Okay. So Travis volunteered. We will work with Travis. I have Travis's permission to take a look at whatever he submitted. This one, right? Cool. Let me reshare so that I have the things side by side. I have to share my whole desktop for that. Click on desktop 1, share, okay, move this here. Oops, where'd it go? Oh gosh, one moment. Oh, okay, this seems to be happening more and more. Yeah, every single time we go here. Teams is one of their newer features, and not everything is completely tested just yet. So you still see 2 tabs, correct? I want to be sure I'm sharing the right thing. It's loading, correct? Thumbs up somewhere.
Yeah, I see.
Okay, great. So in sound, you're working with arrays. And it was kind of funny writing test cases for this because there was a samples array that was a member variable in there. And we were working with manipulating it in part A, something about amplitude, and then some other kind of filtering or editing, modifying the array in part B. In part B, you should know that there's something special about pointers happening. So be careful. Specifically, let's take a look at the problem statement. Actually, well, we'll get there when we talk about part B. Let's talk about part A first. So in part A, you're given an array of numbers, and when they give you what they call it an amplitude, right? You limit it. So based on the absolute value of whatever number, if you exceed that amplitude, then you like change it to be your maximum, to be that maximum. So let's see here. What do I want to show you? I want to show you this thing. So for those that haven't looked over this problem just yet, let's try to understand what's happening in part A. So I'm pulling up the guide. Can I make this go away? Yes, okay. So right here, part A is limit amplitude. So you're given an array of numbers. When we say the limit is 2000, anything that exceeds 2000 in absolute value, like this number here, 4000, gets changed to be negative 2000, right? You can only go up to negative 2000 or positive 2000. Anything that exceeds it gets changed to that limit, like here, negative 2300 gets changed to negative 2000. On the upper end, 2030 is bigger than 2000, so you change it to 2000. And then 3223, it's bigger than 2000, so you change it to positive 2000. Any other numbers are within that amplitude, and so they stay the same. Your goal is to write this limit amplitude function. And they give you a little explanation on the real world like significance of this. If you looked at physics, if you studied waves, I think it works for like pre-calculus too when you studied curves, right? So here's the rubric that matches it on what they were looking for back in 2011. Still has half-point increments, but we know those no longer exist. And let's see how Travis did on his code for part A. It's nice to have things right side up this time. Give it a moment to load. I'll make the console smaller, since what we really care about is the code that he wrote. Click here. Go to his Java file. Okay, sound.java. Can I make this menu go away at all? Alright, maybe something like this. Looks readable. And then change this window to be over a bit more. Can you all read the left-hand side? Is it too small? Okay, it's all good. Oh, and sorry. Although those are the numbers that change, the output should have been a number, right? It reports back on the number of changes that happened. So in that example, I think it was like 4 or 5 numbers were changed. So your limit amplitude function is reporting back like 4 or 5 based on the numbers that got limited. All right, so here's his code. I think I can get it to fit all nicely. He has a for loop. You have some fancy if statements, nice. Count replace that happened to keep track of the numbers that got changed. I'll get my pencil tool. Okay, scribble, scribble, nice, it's there. Double check my recording. It's totally messed up. There we go, now it's fixed. And so let's begin. So first 3 points comes from identifying elements of sample to be modified and modified as required. So the first of these 3 points is consider elements of sample. Half a point for accessing more than one element of sample. Half a point for accessing every element of sample with no bound errors. Let's see. So that's here. I'm looking at his for loop. He does in fact visit more than one sample in this for loop. So you got this half point. Access every element of sample with no bound errors. Well, based on how he declared his for loop, it looks like he starts at 0, ends just before the length. Let's see if he addresses the empty list, which I think was totally legal in this FRQ. If it was size 0, then this empty array, then this code would not run, so great. And can he go beyond? I don't think so. sample, wait a second, samples.length minus 1. So let's say you had 5, 4, and 3, right? So if he starts at 0, 1, and 2, size is 3. Hold on. So what catches my eye right now as like when I'm grading this FRQ is you make use of the strictly less than sign and also the minus 1. So
Yeah,
some
I just
skipping.
realized that. I think that might be a mistake.
No, it's good, right? We're learning from this, right? Because you either pick one or the other, and mistakes, like it's good for everyone here. So unfortunately, because every element is not excess, this would have a minus half point at the moment. But you still overall might do pretty well. You won't get double deducted for that later, and we'll see. So be careful, common mistake to make. Things to address it is like to leave off the minus 1 and just to keep the strictly less than sign, or leave the minus 1 but then make it equal to. Okay, off by 1 error. Classic error to make in computer programming. Oops, sorry, I clicked something. Hey, you're writing and I can see it. Isn't that cool?
I'm just gonna write comments.
Yes. Good note taking. Let me clean up some of my scribbles. Oops, too many scribbles. I wanted to keep the markings I had over there. Okay, so that we got the point for. Let me just redo this, right? Clear. So we got this point, didn't get this point, half point. And then the other 2 points out of this first category of 3 is identifying and changing elements of sample. So the first half point comes from compares element of sample with limit. Sample with limit, nice, that happens. Okay, good. With the positive version of limit. Changes at least one element to limit or negative limit. Yep, that happens here and here. That happens at least once. Assuming there are more than one things in your limit. Yep, you got that point. Changes, let me click around so it's not cut off. Changes all and only elements that exceed the plus or minus limit to limit, okay, to the appropriate numbers. So let's see. As we look at his code, if it is bigger than that limit, which is currently positive, right? It could be positive or negative, the number that they give you here. I have to look back at the rubric. I think it could be always positive, or it could be positive or negative, in which case your code would look a little different. So let's assume it's like that first example, it's positive 2000. Anything bigger than 2000 gets changed to 2000. Increment count. If it is less than, oh wait, is this the right sign? Yes. If it is more negative than the negative version of your limit, then make it that one. Yes. This one's a little tricky. The math with how negative number of sort might have thrown you off in like may have made it like greater than. That's not how negative numbers work. Okay, so it looks like you did in fact do this one correctly. Good job. And let's go on. The other 1.5 points from this portion. Calculate and return number of changed elements of sample. And they break down this further. Initializes and updates a counter to achieve the correct number of changed samples. So that's that thing we've been teaching for a long time, here and here. Looking at the return type, making sure that type is returned. You definitely got the point. Returns value of an updated counter requires array access. So that's inside here. You accessed your array in each of these if statements, and we're looking for count replace being changed. So good job. So overall, from that FRQ, right, out of, let's see, how many points is it? 4.5 points. You got 4 out of that. So overall, pretty good with the classic array out of bounds error being demonstrated here. Good job. Very easy mistakes to make with array out of bounds. The thing that's kind of in the back of my mind as I'm still writing test cases for this is I don't know whether the limit could be like always positive, or it could be Like, could it be negative? What
It's
happens
in
if
the
it's 0?
precondition that
Okay.
limit is greater than or equal to 0.
Equal than 0. Okay, so one edge case that I'm going to write, or one of the test cases, I'm going to include 0 in there just to see what would happen. And when you're writing your code and testing it for yourself, be sure you like include those extremes, right? If you kind of do that like guessing or kind of do that checking on your own, you may have caught this error. It's a good habit to have. Like the middle stuff is not usually what gets you, it's the stuff at the very boundaries. Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. I have to write test cases that still satisfies and meets the preconditions, right? I can't give you something that you shouldn't have to worry about. Other questions and comments? As an exercise too, if you can try grading it on your own, or have like one of your friends in this class, or email someone you're acquainted with, see if they can grade your rubric, or grade your FRQ code based on the rubric and see how you did. Okay, would using an else if instead of second if statement also work? Let me think. So I was kind of worried about this too, because when you have separate if statements, I think the 0 case may have been mishandled, maybe. Like if the limit were 0, I'm a little hesitant on whether or not this code works, because you may have double counted a single change. That's something in the back of my mind when the wheels are turning. So it could have been not addressed in this current code. With an else if, that code would have been addressed. If your limit was, does it even handle 0? Yeah, I think it does. So that's something I have to go back to and think about. But when I write the test cases, hopefully it's caught in there. They're still incomplete at the moment. But good question. You would use else ifs if you don't want the logic to ever overlap. If, as written, the logic could overlap, which could cause side effects, if that makes any sense. You could trigger both, and sometimes you don't want that to happen. In this case, like one number counting twice, for example. So something to think about. I'm unsure. I have to like slow down and work through a couple more examples to see. All right, on to part B. So where do I go? I go here. And then let's take a look at the original FRQ statement from the README here to understand what this problem is doing. And for those that haven't attempted it yet, let's explain what's happening. All right, so in part B, still dealing with that array of numbers, and now we're writing this method, trim silence from beginning, that removes the silence from the beginning of a sound. To remove starting silence, a new array of values is created that contains the same values as the original array. In the same order, but without leading zeros, the instance variable samples is updated to refer to the new array. For example, suppose that the samples refers to the following. This thing. We see the leading sound that happens here. After trim silence from beginning has been called, the samples array now becomes this, which should line up with the later half of the array. So let's take a look at what they give us. Trim silence from beginning, remove all silence. Silence is represented by the value of 0. Precondition, samples contains at least one non-zero value. All right. Postcondition, this is everything we must do. The length of samples reflects the removal of starting silence. Interesting. And then here's our function header. Right off the bat, notice that it is void, so you return nothing here. So you have that pointer stuff that happens to make sure you're pointing to the correct thing. Samples has already been declared at the very top here in your class, your sound class. It is a member variable. It already exists, and so you'll just need to modify and fill in, change its pointing, so on and so forth. Okay. This one I haven't done as much thinking as I did the first problem, so it's likely that I'll miss some stuff. And I have written no test cases for this at the moment. Where do I go? Okay, I want to go back here. Here's the rubric for that part B. And let's take a look. So they want you to create a new array that's the same as the old one, do the chopping, and then change the pointer over. And I believe the rubric should reflect that. Move this over, get some more space so we can see all the code. Double check the time. I got like 6 minutes. Doing okay. I think we'll make it down here. All right, trim silence from beginning. This over a little bit. Okay. All right, so the first thing we are looking for. The first thing we're looking for is that we identify leading zeros, leading zero-valued elements of samples. And they break it down like so. Access every leading zero element of samples, compare zeros and the element of samples, compare zero and multiple elements of samples. Cool, so there's lots of partial credit here. Let's see, where's our code? Are we finding leading zeros? Right, placehold int samples.length. All right, we create an array that is of the same size as our samples. In this line, this student is copying over everything from your samples array into this placeholder. Makes you think back to like the buffer from Game of Life, doesn't it? Next up, here is our logic to find leading zeros. While count index is less than samples.length and samples, did it get cut off? I think it got slightly. So I think this is all one line. All right, sample at position count index equals 0. Cool. So we're maintaining that leading part, right? It's not just any old 0. They have to be in specific places. When your count index is less than the length, okay, so you're within the array and your count index at this certain position equals 0. Cool. Let's continue. Lots of things going on in my brain. Samples equals new int. Here, this code seems to be doing the chopping. It is of the correct size as you have accounted for. Are you accounting for? Is this all zeros or just leading zeros? Let's see. All right. So what I would kind of test that, right? I'm having some doubts. So, like for example, 0, 1, 2, and 0, correct? As written, there's only one leading 0 here, but at the moment, I think this code may count 2. Let's see and find out and test. So count index equals 0, great. That starts off at 0. While count index is less than samples.length, which it is, it's 0, and sample at count index equals 0. Yep, that's one of them. So we index it, so now it's 1. Count index increases, but count index here is not equal to 0, so it stays the same. However, and then we stop. So there's only one leading 0. Nice. Looks like this code appropriately works for this one test case. If it has more than one, let's test it. Let's say it had 3 leading zeros. And then we had 1 and 2. Count index starts at 0. Its index is less than length. Sample here is 1, 0. Nice, so we increment it. Becomes 1. And then we check. Yep, we're good. Index second one is 0, so we increase it. Then position 2, also a 0. Sorry, 2 and 3. Stop at 3. And then these things aren't equal to 0. Yeah, so looks like this code works appropriately. Nice. So we accessed every leading 0. We compare elements. Compare 0 and the elements of sample. Yes, we did. Compares multiple. Yep, it repeated as shown here. So you got 1.5 points. Create array of proper length. Determines correct number of elements to be in the resulting array. Creates new array of determined length. Cool. So you do the subtracting. Nice. That's this part. And then creates new array of determined length. So this part is trying to be kind. If you did the wrong calculation and created a new array, they wanted to give you half a point for that. So you got this whole point in this single line of code. Onto the, I guess, hardest part from this weighting. 2 points for removing silence values from sample. Half a point for copies some values other than leading 0 values. Let's see. I think so. What's interesting to me, yep, it's like this offset that happens, right? So for sure you copy some values other than the leading zeros, yes. We have to be careful here and like, do you skip appropriately? Things I'm worried about is array out of bounds, perhaps. Copies all and only values other than the leading 0 values, preserving original order. If I is growing, count index is your offset. In this case, we're offset by 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. Starts at 0. Yeah, we're going to be okay. The length thing did not actually, does it? Do we go too much? That's what I'm worried about. Because right now your stopping point, I think we may go out of bounds here, but I think you would get this point. Modifies instant variable samples to reference newly created array. Samples with an S. Ooh, so you wouldn't get this last point, I think. Right? Unless I'm reading it wrong. I think modification should happen. I don't think it goes out of bounds because placeholder is the same length as samples originally was. Okay, I think we're okay, sorry. And to the second point, you are correct because things should be stored in sample, but you're using this based on placeholders, so we're okay. You do get this one. This is what we needed to be changed. I'm a little bit unsure, and I don't know if I can write a test case that can check for this. All right, I'm thinking I plus I count index. Yeah, not 100% sure. I think we're okay, but there is still the nagging thought in my head of array out of bounds. For time consideration, we'll just pause it there. Perhaps we'll discuss this further on Monday, or I'll just write and create a slide on it. I've kept you over 2 minutes. Sorry about that. Formally, you're all dismissed. If you're curious, feel free to stay a couple minutes if you so desire. See ya. Have a good one. Thanks for volunteering today, Travis. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye. Yes, question.